Aliens Explored is a weekly podcast exploring famous and obscure cases of UFO sightings, alien abductions and other strange events from both a believing and a sceptical perspective whilst keeping an open mind. I'm Stu Jackson, a professional actor and amateur ufologist with a particular interest in the crop circle phenomenon. I'll be debating that otherworldly visitations are real. The truth is out there.
And I'm Neil Kelly. I'm a professional actor as well and used to work for the military as an intelligence analyst. I'll be arguing from a more doubtful point of view. I mean, it's all a bit far-fetched, isn't it?
We often hear so many UFO reports where UFO appears in front of someone then disappears again, leaving behind no evidence, only the word of the person who has seen it. But what if there was an actual interaction? What if there was physical evidence left by the UFO? Well, in 1979 in Minnesota, Deputy Sheriff Val Johnson had just such an encounter with a UFO. Join myself and Neil as we discuss the famous Val Johnson UFO case on Aliens Explored.
Hello everyone and welcome to Aliens Explored, your weekly podcast where we explore extraterrestrial phenomena. I'm one of your hosts, I'm Neil Kelly.
And I'm Stu Jackson.
And this week we will be looking at the Officer Val Johnson incident in Minnesota in 1979. So Stu, what's all this one about?
Oh, this is a really exciting one. So quite often in ufology, that kind of almost the holy grail is physical evidence of UFO interaction. So here's a situation way back in 1979, on the 27th of August at 2 a.m. to be specific, over in Minnesota. You have Officer Val Johnson, who's pootling along in his car, as you do, a Ford LTD, for what it's worth, in his police car, encounters a bright light. He loses 39 minutes of time. Both his watch and the clock on the dashboard stop for 14 minutes. And the vehicle itself is damaged. Now that's the real interesting part of this. There is evidence to show interaction. The windshield is smashed. The headlight is broken. One of the emergency lights on the roof is broken. And a radio aerial is bent. Val Johnson himself has marks. He's got bruises, and he has an eye irritation that a physician who examined him said was very similar to what they call welder's burn. So when you look at a welding light and it basically singes your iris, but it's basically a very, very bright light that burns your eyeball.
Well, not only were he burned around the eyes, but his actual eyeballs were seared. As if he, obviously matched his story of seeing a very, very bright light. And the damage on the car. Now someone has examined the car. Meridian French, an expert from the Ford Motor Company, examined the damage and bizarrely concluded that the crack patterns and apparent sequence of fractures seem to be due to inward and outward forces acting almost simultaneously. So something in the car and something out the car crushing, I guess, the windscreen. Or did Johnson remember the light actually coming into the car?
Yes, that's one report that I heard, that the light approached, that a beam of light came from this orb of light, and then the orb of light itself basically went inside the car.
Now, Officer Johnson said that his first thought when he saw the light, he could see that it wasn't a vehicle. It wasn't a vehicle on the road. It was something just a bit above the road. His first thought was that it was an aircraft making an emergency landing, but which would cause, that would break your headlight and bend your aerial and knock the light off your roof. Definitely, but it would also leave a broken aircraft or a damaged aircraft somewhere nearby to be found, which wasn't evident.
It would also do a damn sight more damage than a broken windshield.
Well, no, if it's a light aircraft, it just kind of clips you with the undercarriage, I guess. I don't know.
Okay. All right. But how would that break the headlight without damaging the bonnet?
Yeah, I don't know.
Okay. Now, he did say that the bright light itself was 8 to 12 inches in diameter.
Yeah, so not a big
feet off
craft.
the ground.
He didn't hit a full-size UFO unless extraterrestrials are a lot smaller than we generally assume them to be. So he was outside a place called Stephen, spelled like the man's name, Stephen, Minnesota. About 5 miles from there on Highway 5. Now he was unconscious for 39 minutes. He's worked out, but when he awoke, he realised his wristwatch and the vehicle's clock had stopped for 14 minutes. Presumably, they'd stopped and then started. They were just running they were running again, but 14 minutes slow.
I'm just going to, I suppose, contradict a little bit here. The report that I've got says he was on Highway 220 near Warren, Minnesota.
Oh, right. So here we found a discrepancy already.
We have found a discrepancy. Okay. Well, if any of the listeners know the area, is it that Highway 5 is an offshoot of 220 or something like that?
Or are they the same road? I mean, you get that in Europe a lot, don't you, where a highway will have a national designation and an A route, but it will also be an E designation. It'll be a European route.
Yes. So
you don't get that so much in Britain.
No, but like you say, it does happen in Europe. So perhaps some of our American listeners might be able to clarify that for us. But yes, that is a discrepancy right there. Okay.
Also, I mean, I think it was quite apparent to a lot of people when this story came out how similar it was to what happens in Close Encounters of the Third Kind, the movie where they're driving along and there's suddenly all these lights flying at them down the road.
Yes.
Buzzing them. So something very similar to that. Oh, actually, yeah.
Well, on that particular subject, so you're going to find that because Close Encounters of the Third Kind was based on actual events that people have experienced.
But then this happened afterwards. Yeah.
Yes, but the fact that it had happened repeatedly beforehand isn't going to stop it from happening afterwards. If it's a phenomenon that's really happening, the fact of a movie coming out that depicts that same phenomena isn't going to change whether or not it happens.
Sorry, just going back to where he actually was, according to UFO Insight, he was approximately 10 miles outside the town of Stephen on Marshall County Road 5. And as he approached the intersection with Minnesota State 220, he looked to check for traffic before continuing. As he did, he witnessed a very bright, brilliant light seemingly heading in his direction. So I'm trying to imagine what this looked like. So was he wasn't at a T-junction because he was still driving down the road when this thing hit, wasn't he?
Yeah, I mean, the report I'm reading says that he was on a rural section of State Highway 220 near Warren, Minnesota. I mean, that sounds
like it's the same place. We're just getting.
It sounds like it's
we're getting hung up on the highway designations.
A different description.
Yeah.
So to give Johnson's own words, when he had a taped police interview, he said, "I noticed a very bright, brilliant light, 8 to 12 inches in diameter, 3 to 4 feet off the ground. The edges were very defined." So that's That's Johnson's own description there. He drove towards the light and he woke up in the ditch 39 minutes, well, half an hour, 39 minutes later with burns around his eyes and damage to the car.
There's a photo of his car where you can see the skid marks where brakes have obviously been applied, and then the car is kind of turned 90 degrees, so it's on the other side of the road. The front wheels are in a ditch just off the road, but most of the car is still on the highway.
Yeah.
Yeah, on the other side of the road.
That's an emergency stop right there.
Yeah, which he claims he has no knowledge of, that something else applied the brakes for him. He'd lost consciousness by this time, but, you know, who knows? I know that people can not remember doing things just before they lose consciousness.
Yes, I was going to say, not remembering a thing doesn't mean to say he wasn't. He wasn't conscious, or that someone else did it.
Yeah. Now, he declined to undergo a polygraph test. I guess that's only mandatory if you're accused of murder or something like that. Not when you're just trying to explain damage to your car, which presumably wasn't very expensive, apart from the fact that the car was taken out of service and is now the UFO car on display as a well, presumably it's earning its income in that way now, as a curiosity to be visited rather than as a working highway patrol car.
I would have thought it was repaired and put back into service, and then when it was retired, it went into the museum.
No, I think it's in the museum still with its broken windscreen and bent aerial and.
Oh, it is to this day. But what I'm thinking is, at the time, I imagine it was repaired and put back into service, and then when it was time to, you know, when it had done its service, when it was retired, I don't imagine it went straight into the museum.
I don't know, I imagine it would be held as evidence of something for a while, wouldn't it? That we've got this wrecked police car and we need to examine it and find out what happened. And the officer's story is a bit unusual. I mean, initial reactions and suspicions were that the incident was ball lightning. And others pointed to the overhead power lines at the scene itself as a likely source of the bright light. But if a power line had come down, that would be... I mean, I know that would make a bright... I've seen a power line come down. It does make a bright light. But then you've also got a power line down that everyone would see when they're on the scene. Oh, that's what
you have evidence of that.
Yeah. So there was nothing apart from his wrecked car, or slightly damaged car, presumably still drivable car.
Well, that's it. I mean, you've got the actual damage to the car. You've got the physical burns to his eyes and his bruises.
Now, Officer Johnson went into a kind of... Well, they say he went into hiding, but according to one report I read, he wasn't very hard to find. He just got fed up with answering questions about it and moved to a job in a different state.
Yeah, he didn't really go into hiding. He just stopped talking about it.
Yeah.
I mean, he won't himself. He doesn't say it was a UFO. He just says, I don't know what it is, and he's moved on with his life.
Well, you know, a ball of light 10 inches across doesn't meet the usual criteria for a UFO, does it? And it actually comes through your windscreen.
Well, yes, that's not that uncommon as a UFO description.
As a very small
balls of light. Yeah, but think back to when we were talking about the Foo Fighters. That's how they were described, was balls of light.
But presumably, I mean, I don't think I've ever read it explicitly, but I always assumed that the Foo Fighters were seen as something that could be the size of a manned aircraft, rather than something very small.
Yes, and that's an assumption that it's very easy to make. It's one I would make. But yeah, I don't recall that ever being explicitly said. And certainly when you're up in the air, perspective can do funny things, can't it?
It can, yeah. And presumably, I mean, drones are very commonplace on our planet now. It's not beyond the realms of possibility that extraterrestrials might deploy drones. There's all sorts of good reasons why drones are better than manned aircraft. All sorts of situations. For one thing, they're being much smaller because they haven't actually got to carry a human being.
Yeah.
In fact, I have read that the current generation of military jet aircraft will probably be the last generation of manned jet aircraft. That they'll all be unmanned.
Radio controlled.
Radio controlled, yeah. If it can be controlled just as well from someone sat on the ground, and have the benefit of being smaller and more expendable.
Well, that's a bit Skynet right there.
Yeah, but that's...
I mean, do these people not watch, movies?
Yeah.
Okay.
They do,
so,
but they probably take away a different lesson from them that we do.
So this might end up being a shorter than usual episode with this one then. So it's certainly a bit of an enigma. I mean, let's look at what alternatives there could be. It's been suggested that he actually did the damage himself to the vehicle.
That he crashed his car, but Val Johnson was an officer with an impeccable record. That anyone can have a car accident, even on their own on a lonely highway. You can crash a car. You could fall asleep or whatever. That it's. I think a police officer would recognise that it would not be in your interest to come out with an outlandish story that's going to be examined for its veracity by thousands of people all over the world. You're better off coming up with a very, very mundane explanation that will just be, one of those things. Well, we'll you need a new windscreen and a new light. We'll take that out your paycheck. Yeah, fair enough. Yeah. And then forget about it.
Exactly. So he certainly gives an interesting story there. Also, if he damaged the car himself, I mean, let's say worst case scenario, yes, he did it for the attention, he damaged his car, he came up with his wild story. How did he injure his eyes?
Yeah. And did he actually see the lights come into the car? Was it in his lap? And then he heard the glass breaking as he blacked out. It somehow came through the glass without breaking it, and then...
I'm not 100% sure of that. What I gather is that basically this ball of light was there and he drove effectively into it. Now at this point, as I understand it, that's when he's got this loss of memory or he's blacked out or whatever happened for him not to be aware.
Yeah, I mean there have been lots of stories, lots of descriptions of strange glowing orbs on lonely country roads. There's the Min Min lights of the Australian outback. Apparently, have been seen for decades. And of course, as we discussed with our listener Rudy's case, the Marfa lights of Texas. People have been witnessing a similar kind of thing. These glowing orbs chasing cars down the highway.
Yes. So I'm struggling. Well, do you know what? I feel like I'm almost summarising already. I don't know what else we can really say about this because he's come forward. He's given his story. He's got no explanation. The damage is there. The damage is there to the vehicle. The injuries are there to him. And that's it, really. There's not much more. I can't think why he would make it up.
The damage is consistent with him hitting something, but there was nothing. Obviously, they would have, for instance, hitting an animal. That would do that kind of damage. Your bonnet hits it, which breaks the light. It comes up onto the bonnet, smashes your breaks your windscreen and then goes over the roof, damaging your headlight and bending your aerial. That would that would be, but then there'd be a dead animal, or maybe it was and there would be blood on the car.
Yes, and didn't you say that the expert from Ford Motor Company determined that the pressure came equally from inside and outside at the same time?
Yeah.
That's a really weird bit. So, like I say, a bit of a shorter episode, but that's fine. So let's summarise then. So, Val Johnson, Neil, did he encounter a UFO?
I don't think Val Johnson himself has never said that it was a UFO.
No.
It was a strange orb of light that he couldn't explain. That at first he thought it was a small aircraft coming into land and making an emergency landing on the highway, and then he blacked out and woke up 39 minutes later with his watch and the car's clock running 14 minutes slow, and some fairly mundane damage to his easily repairable damage done to his vehicle. But he was found by a colleague, wasn't he? He was still set, and he didn't just sort of get over it and drive away. He was found by a colleague, and had this physical injury that was very difficult to explain. He had this injury to his eyes, which thankfully wasn't permanent, but was consistent with being dazzled by a very bright light. I remember once I was at Lanzarote, and there's a restaurant there on top of a volcano, and it's kind of unnerving because you're kind of there, and they do this little demonstration. There's a bit where the guy he gets a water bottle and pours some water in a hole in the ground, and a few seconds later it shoots out as a great big geyser of steam, and then he shoves some loose sort of brush into a hole which catches fire, and you think, bloody hell. And then you're in this restaurant where the food is being cooked on the volcano. It's like a big sort of, I suppose, like a well, but about 10 feet in diameter with a grill over it. And I thought, well, can you look? I mean, you can approach it. The wall's only about 3 feet high. Can I actually look down into the volcano? And I sort of did, and then immediately realised it's going to burn my eyeballs out. I could actually feel the heat on my face. And thought, so I can imagine it's quite an alarming feeling. Your eyes being seared by heat.
Yes. But yeah. So what do you reckon? Is he?
He's encountered something.
Is it otherworldly?
It's certainly something we don't have an explanation for. Whether it's otherworldly, I don't know. It's something that seems to. Why does it only happen on lonely country roads? Or maybe it happens in other lonely places as well, but there's no one there to see it. But lonely roads, occasionally, it'll be a car on their own. Well,
for my part, I'm quite unusually going to put forward a different theory here. I wonder if this was like plasma ball, which is a phenomenon that does happen. It's quite rare, but if this is a ball of plasma, this could have had effects. I mean, it will certainly cause the burns to his eyes. It can have an electromagnetic effect that would affect the watch, possibly cause him to black out. I don't know. It would meet the physical description. So, I'm wondering if it's something like if it's a phenomenon like ball plasma.
Actually, I've just thought
lightning.
Another burning question. Forgive the pun. We know where it came into the car through the windscreen. How did it get out the car again, or did it fizzle? Did it evaporate into nothing, or did it go out the way it came in? Or, I mean, that could explain the damage from inside that it came into the car and then went out the car again.
But then that wouldn't explain the pressure being applied equally at the same time.
No, but if it smashed through the windscreen and then smashed back out again, you would have glass in the car from the inward coming plasma ball and glass outside the car from the outward going ball.
Could be. Could be.
But that's my question. Where did it go? What happened to it after it hit his car? Did it just? I mean, he says it was in the car with him, doesn't he? But it looks like, I mean, just based on the damage to the car, it looks like, it hit his, like running over an animal. The headlight hit it first, and it bounced over the bonnet. There's a little dent in the bonnet, you can see. It hit the windscreen and then bounced over the roof, damaging his red light and his antenna. That's what it looks like. But
so did it go over the car, or did it come into the car though?
Maybe it didn't. I mean, maybe it hit the windscreen with enough force to smash it, and it was bright enough to sear his eyes, but then it bounced over the car. Because otherwise, where did it go? It's obviously something quite substantial. If it had landed in the back seat, there'd definitely be a big hole burnt in it. Yeah. And presumably, a police car. He's going to have a cage behind him, isn't he? Behind, separating the people in the front from the potential arrestees in the back.
I don't know if every police car has that.
Well, I'm looking at a picture of it here, and it looks like it's got.
But this is a hell of a summary. Gotta say.
Sorry, yeah. I'm saying, it can't have got through to the back because there's that cage there,
right,
which is undamaged. So
unless it can pass through cages, if it's not solid.
Yeah.
Then if it's not solid, how does it do the damage?
Yeah. If it's So
very,
very strange.
Unanswered questions. Yeah, definitely. I think we can agree it was a very strange occurrence.
And of course the person it happened to lost consciousness, so his memory of it is partial and perhaps not entirely reliable.
Indeed. But what do you think, listeners? Is Val Johnson a subject of physical interaction with the UFO, or is there a more earthly explanation, like the ball lightning or ball plasma?
Or just the guy who crashed his car and was too embarrassed to fess up to it?
Or indeed something really mundane like that. Do write in and let us know. And as a complete aside to this podcast, if you like listening to Neil and myself, we are actually members of a different podcast of a different kind, aren't we, Neil?
Very, very, very different kind, yes.
So we partake on an actual play role-playing podcast. This is very similar to the old Dungeons and Dragons tabletop role-playing. It's actually based on Pathfinder, which is a different system, but that's into technicalities. But if you want to hear more on that, head on over to talesfromthe20side.com or just search on wherever you get your podcast from. Tales from the 20 Side. We have a lot of fun doing that, don't we, Neil?
We do, yeah. We do.
So there we go. Don't forget to join us next time when we will be discussing the videos released by the Pentagon in April this year. Very exciting.
Looking forward to that.
Indeed. So until then, keep watching the road ahead and those skies.
See you next time.
That's it from me. Take care.
And that's it from me. Bye-bye. Aliens Explored is a Feagle Films production in association with Juicy Falls. Music by hooksounds.com and editing by Stu Jackson. Find us on Facebook and Twitter or by visiting aliensexplored.com.